We're going to talk today about data-driven personas. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. We're going to talk a little bit about how we're really trying to rehabilitate the idea of personas. A lot of times people hear personas and they have this instinctive ugh, because they think of them as something that marketing cooked up in a back room, or something that a UI designer and a few friends made up over coffee. These are not those types of personas. They leverage data that we already own, as well as we gather data. And it's kind of nice, some ways, going last, because we're really about the blend of the qualitative and the quantitative data. And we've seen that over and over again during this conference. So we hope that this will be a nice how-to, and also give you an idea of how some of the other ideas that we've heard in conference sessions in the last couple of days can be brought to fruition. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is stories and data, and how a really good story is the best way to really put forth the idea of what a customer wants. We'll talk a little bit about who we are and how we came to be. We actually had no organizational alignment whatsoever. We met over, I was doing my one-on-ones, I just started, and it all grew from there. So we'll tell you a little bit about that. Then Morgan's going to take us through our approach, research methods, and then I'll talk a little bit about customer data mining. We'll show you our final product, and then we'll tell you a little bit about how we applied it to our content strategy. So that's what you're in for. We have purposely timed ourselves to leave a lot of time for questions, only because we think that there might be some. Some of this is kind of down in the weeds of UX research methodology and might not be the most intuitive thing to pick up at first. So what are stories? Stories are data with a soul. I don't know if any of you have read or seen Dr. Brené Brown's TED Talks, but her information about vulnerability and empathy is really applicable to having a data-driven content strategy, because you're really looking to have empathy and understand the vulnerabilities of your customer. If you just look at quantitative data, you're not going to get there. If you just look at qualitative data, you might miss out on some meat that would help not only sell your project to your stakeholders, but also give a much more structured idea of the environment in which your customer works. So, what is a data-driven persona? I've talked about this already a little bit. It is a blend, and it's a rich story that combines qualitative and quantitative data. For us, that meant user research and user observation. It also meant mining sales and customer support data. And we'll talk about specifics about that a little later. But why are we doing this in the first place? Well, here's my friend the hippo. He's the highest paid person opinion in the room. Without data to support your views, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, generally everyone assumes. Everyone makes a judgment call about what they think customers want or what they think customers need. And this happens across the enterprise. So we'll talk a little bit about my role. I am a newly minted product content experience director. So I look at how data and customer needs play out across the enterprise. And that means that we are looking at not just content, but how content can drive investing in the right product developments and ideas, the content itself, building out events people want to go to, training assets that meet needs and budgets, but most importantly, we're really trying to understand our customers' backgrounds and environments and their workflows. We really want to get to know them for what they can give us. So, a little bit about us. I mentioned that I'm newly minted. When I did this project with Morgan, I worked at Okta as a knowledge architect. I have since been given the role at F5 Networks as that product content experience director. I work with marketing. In fact, I am the bridge to marketing. I think it's fairly well known that sometimes marketing can be in this silo and technical content can be in this silo, and never the twain shall meet. Trying to break those silos down right now. The other thing that to know about me is that I have a love of the quantitative data, and really could give a million stats that could help Morgan talk about our customers, and Morgan would just be like, so Morgan brings life to the project, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Laurel. Hi, my name is Morgan Eisler. I lead user experience research at Okta. A couple ways we need to unpack that so the rest of the presentation makes sense. User experience research is a little bit of a bridge between business needs and user needs. So I spend a lot of time identifying what our users need, what they want, if they can use the stuff that we make, if they like the stuff that we make, if they desperately wish the stuff that we make did something else to help them. So that looks like, at a tactical level, usability testing, feature testing, but at a strategic level, it also looks like field studies and discovery for what should we build next. And if we build a mobile product, how can we make it relevant to our market? All of that stuff. And you can see where that would intersect with content, right? If we're not showing people the stuff that they need to get their tasks done, then they're going to have all kinds of failures. And then Okta, we have to talk about this just a little bit because we did this project at Okta. And Okta is an enterprise software company. We're mostly in the cloud. We make identity and access management products. So what that means is that we give large companies a way to control their employees' access to company data. So who's allowed access to what and when, and then the ability to layer security on top of that, like multi-factor authentication or something like that. This is just a sort of by-the-way thing. If we get in the weeds about any of the technical properties of Okta, you can call me on it later during questions, and I'm happy to explain it. All the other stuff about me is true: glitter, ponies, pink, but also people. So I'm going to take us through our approach to the qualitative side of things, keeping in mind that personas, especially the data-driven ones, they are data models of a sort. Personas are not real people. They're models of people that could be real. So at Okta, we have shades and shades and shades of customers, right? Almost anyone at almost any business of certain size could be our customer. And we can't make a cast of characters of all of those people because it would be too many people to remember. So we're talking about personas. We're talking about almost like a play. We're casting our characters that are recognizable and that represent a good amount of a certain part of our customers. So in order to get started, you'll have to identify some kind of customer category that you want to go after. And you don't want it to be too narrow or too wide, right? It says there, don't boil the ocean. That's me talking about if we tried to represent all the customers that Okta could possibly have, I don't think we'd ever finish. At the same time, if we decided to do enterprise IT admins at healthcare companies, they wouldn't be super relevant to everyone. So we ended up with enterprise IT admins, which means enterprise IT admins who are the primary users of our actual product at enterprise-sized companies. So that was just narrow enough to give us a little bit of scope to the project, and it was wide enough that it was applicable to a bunch of different things and different types of content. So again, I just sort of skipped over this, but selecting verticals, you either want to kind of have everyone from the same vertical, if that's helpful for you. If you specialize in healthcare, then it makes sense that all the customers you talk to are going to be in healthcare. If you have a big mix, then try to get your customer set that you do research with to have that same mix. You want it to be representative. So we're going to go through this in a little bit more detail, but when you find customers to interview, you want to guide the conversation instead of controlling it. We're going to talk about bias questions and things like that in a minute. So, and then Laurel's part of this is selecting metrics, quantitative metrics, that provide color and that make sense for user experience. For us, those were things like what kind of support package did they buy and how many product SKUs have they purchased? What does their use case look like? So this is just a quick fact sheet of what our qualitative research side looked like. We did 11 interviews. And I know for some folks, 11 seems like a very small sample size. But in qualitative research, you really want to keep that sample size between 10 and 15. So if you do less than 10, you're probably missing some good, juicy stuff. And if you do 15 or more, think about having 15 transcripts of 60-minute interviews, more than that you have to do something with, you have to make sense of. The data starts to pile up. And then statistically, you see diminishing returns in qualitative research after 15 participants. If you're interested in the statistics and the math behind that figure, Jeff Sauro, S-A-U-R-O, is somebody you could read. So we asked a lot of questions. We had 21 qualitative data elements. We had 10 quantitative that Laurel mined for us. Our dimension set ended up being 15, and I promise I'm going to talk about dimension sets later. And then all of that data turned into 4 personas with one that was provisional. And we'll also talk about what provisional means. So bear with me. This is making the sashes part. So this is where we're talking about the nitty-gritty, like if you wanted to go home and do this yourself, how might you go about it? So you asked for my advice, but you never listen. Grumpy cat face. I'm sure that this happens to all of us, right, in the lines of work that we're in. But when you're talking with customers, you're interviewing for open-ended discussion, and it's almost amazing how easily you can bias your session. For instance, how much do you like my shoes? Is anyone here going to say, not at all?
80%.
Right? Maybe you might have said, oh, yeah, they're okay, if you didn't like them. But if I asked you that question that way, were you really going to say no? So instead of asking someone, how much do you like something, or how much do you dislike it, ask them how they feel. What do you think about? How do you feel about our product? How do you feel about the company? What's your impression of what this is supposed to do? So you're asking questions that illustrate attitudes and behavior. If you saw Will's presentation yesterday about search, it starts with a question. It starts with a task, an idea. Why is someone in your product? Why are they on your website? What are they doing here? So ask these questions of your actual customers and users so that you can find out what they really want to do. You can find out if they access your product on lunch break once a day because they have to, and they have to do a certain number of tasks in a time crunch because they want to eat their sandwich, or if they live in there all day and it makes no difference to them. So this is the kind of stuff you can illuminate with qualitative research. And then while you're conducting these interviews, follow up to show that you're listening, right? Make affirmative noises. If you can see someone, nod your head, paraphrase, and offer them the opportunity to correct you. You know, a lot of us work with enterprise folks, with other professionals. They're absolutely willing to correct you if you give them the opportunity. Have I got this right? If I understand you correctly, X, Y, Z. And they might say, no, actually, A, B, C. But you're not going to find out necessarily. They might not interrupt you unless you give them the opportunity to do so. So this is super hard to see. And I had to redact a lot of the data. But this is our ginormous spreadsheet of qualitative data. And it's important to stay organized because you are actually collecting a lot of data. And it's really easy to listen to a 45-minute conversation and take 5 bullet points of notes. But you miss a lot of things. You miss the hesitation when someone answers you and says, yeah, I guess that's right. There's a lot of good stuff. So try to take recordings of these interviews if you can. If you can't, try to take verbatim notes, which is what I do, and along with a recording. They also make really, really good artifacts. So when you have stakeholders and other people to convince of the validity of your work and your research, you have transcripts. You have things that you can point them to when they say, I don't really believe our customer said that. Or, I don't know, I just don't think that's the right interpretation. Well, you can have them listen to it. You can point them to it. And staying organized just makes your life easier later because, as you'll see, working with qualitative data is kind of old-fashioned and messy and involves a lot of Post-it notes. So you want to stay organized. So if we look at my spreadsheet, you can look at the slides later yourselves maybe, but what I do is for every question that we ask a customer, I put it in one column in an Excel spreadsheet, and I record every customer's answer per column so that when you're finished, your data is already collated. You say, why did you purchase Okta? And you have a nice little line of all the responses that you can read down. It gives you an idea of trends as you scan it. So staying organized just really will make your life easier later.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the customer data mining piece of it, and I also put my results in that big spreadsheet. So this was a skunkworks project. I'm not going to tell you any lies. This was not slick. There was no database of customer information that we could plug this into. Basically, I looked at 2 data sets. One was our Salesforce data, so what we ask when we set up a new client in Salesforce, and the other was our customer support data. And I will say that organization starts at the beginning. I was very fortunate that when we set up our Salesforce data collection points, they asked some very good questions. So not only was it the basic stuff like what SKUs did they purchase, they asked, what's your use case? How many cloud applications do you have in your environment? So they really gathered a lot of interesting information that we could use to round out. And that's something that you can work with your sales team to get if you don't have it today. So the SKUs, so the number, I would say the SKUs I definitely looked at because that would tell me the complexity of their Okta environment. It is easy with quantitative data to get seduced into the simplistic answer and assume, oh, they have 5 SKUs. They have a complex environment. Oh, they have 1 SKU. They have a simple environment. But the truth is that you have to go back and blend this with the qualitative data because it could be that they have 1 Okta SKU, but they have 5 other identity management SKUs in their data center, and they're having to manage both a mix of on-prem and cloud data, or they're just trying Okta to see if they want to switch off of their other solutions. So, you can't take anything as pure gospel on its own. Another set of metrics that we looked at was it's very important to know what if they bought training and if they took training. And basically that leads and pairs with a qualitative data question that we had, which is how do you learn Okta and how do you keep up to date with Okta? And frequently we found that people were definitely buying training but not taking it. And their favorite ways to learn about Okta was to either ask a peer or to go out to our community and to our community forums. So that was informative for our training department to know that, hey, sales is doing their duty. They're selling your stuff. But for some reason, you're not getting the engagement on the customer side. They're not picking it up and taking those classes.